Hi YouTube, welcome back to my channel, So Fast Die Young. I'm Morgan. Today we are going to do the second half of the bodice for my period vintage reproduction Gunne Sax dress. So if you didn't watch the other video, the last where we ended, I had gone through how to drape a version of the top on my mannequin, and now we're going to take it from the fabric draped pieces to a paper pattern, and then I'm going to walk through how I true up the pattern and make sure that everything matches and is ready for cutting out, how I make registration marks to make sure that everything fits together properly. Then we're going to move on and go through making patterns for the sleeves. I have a little shortcut that I'm taking for part of that, and then I explain how to do a gauntlet pattern for the forearm piece. And then just an overview of the entire bodice pattern together. So yeah, by the end of this video, I will have a complete bodice pattern ready to go. We'll do the skirt in the next video. So without any further ado, let's go on to making the pattern. Okay, so I have my three pieces now. I took all of the pins out except for here where I still needed them for the neckline. I've got my side seam. Sorry, I was upside down. I got my center back. Now I'm going to take my pokey wheel and some tracing tools and redraft them, starting in pencil on some paper, like basically copying them, and then I'm going to clean them up. So you can watch me do that. I'm going to do it from this side. Center back piece, and right now I did, just for the moment, draw in the seam allowance. So this is if you wanted to add your seam allowance ahead of time, this is how you would do it. You would draw your, and these are your stitching lines, and then these are your seam allowance lines. Now, oops, as I stick my finger in front of the camera, I'm actually not going to cut out with the seam allowance because, well, I need to true up my pattern still. And truing my pattern is after you've done all of the pattern pieces, you basically make sure all of the edges match how you're expecting them to, as well as figure out registration marks that you're going to need. So what I like to do is here I would write 1 essay. Yeah, so add 1 inch seam allowance. This could be plus 0.5 essay. Okay. And I think I explained this on one of my Red Riding Hood videos. So that means seam allowance. Now, in different areas, okay, so like side seams, I tend to add more. Sometimes I'll add more at the waist. I'm not going to add more because I'm pretty sure that this is going to be fine. Usually I need to take up my waist anyways. Center back, sometimes I like to add anywhere between 1 to 2 inches, depending on exactly what it is. Shoulder, neck seam, I'm only going to add half. Here I'm only going to add half. Sometimes on the shoulder seams I will add more, because that's a place where a lot of times alterations can happen depending on the body. Mine I usually don't need. Usually I end up taking in. Again, since I draped this on my Uniquely You, I don't think I'm going to have to worry about some of these things so much, but we'll see. So this is... yeah, so... but it's just helpful to remember. And even if I don't need to add, like if I did this, I would usually label a 1 inch seam allowance so that I know how much I've actually put in here. Especially if I'm tracing anything and don't have these internal lines, like the stitching line. The thing that I like about having a pattern where I don't have the seam allowance added in is I can trace the stitching lines, which not so great for myself, like it's not something I need, but for young or new sewers it's actually kind of really nice to have the stitching line drawn on a garment so that you know exactly where you're stitching and exactly where you're lining up points. I felt like it made things go faster in the costume shop for some of our less experienced sewers at times. So now I'm going to go on and continue to trace the other pieces, but it's going to basically be the exact same thing. And then I will show you how to true up the pattern after this. And I'm doing it in kind of a weird way because I want to make use of my paper here, so I'm not doing it in the same order that I would normally. And I also, in this case, I think I am going to end up mirroring this piece. So once I trace it, I actually will cut it with an extra big piece and then like actually fold it, and when I cut down my seam allowance I will actually cut the mirrored piece so that I have a piece that looks exactly like this. I could cut on a fold, but I think it will be nice to have this placket stitching line on the pattern in the same way this is. So, and that way I don't have to like fold a tiny little piece of pattern. I can kind of just lay this down wherever I need to on the fabric and cut it. I think it'll also be helpful because I think this piece gets lace on top of it. Like, there's several reasons, but I think it'll be nice to have the full piece, not just cut me on a fold. If that makes sense. I hope that what I'm saying about that makes sense. Yeah. So the next part of doing this, so once you kind of have your pieces drafted out on paper, this is when you have to do a thing called truing your pattern. So at this point, what you want to do is you want to make sure that, okay, oh, actually I should have done this after. So I'm going to take this side piece, right? And I'm going to take my side seam and I'm going to line it up to my back side seam. And I'm going to make sure that the top and bottom line up and that everything, like looks like it's going to line up correctly and match each other. And then you can also, at this point, do a registration mark. So you get it lined up the top, lined up the bottom, and you can do like a little, like 2 little marks. Then you can take your pattern notcher, if you have a pattern notcher. I love having a pattern notcher because it makes it much easier to mark these things, and pop those out. And then you would do the same thing on this, and then you would know exactly where those registration, when you're tracing this, you would know exactly where to flick those little marks. And the nice thing about the pattern notcher is it doesn't matter if you're tracing it on this side or on this side, because they're actually physically cut out. You know exactly where they are. Okay? So now you have to do the same thing with your curve. So, the front curve of this seam. So I'm going to line up my bottoms, and I'm going to do a little notch there. And then I'm going to walk my pattern very slowly. I'm going to walk my pattern up along my bust seam. I'm going to walk this one down, and I'm going to see if they meet. And actually, they don't. There's a slight difference. So I don't know if you can see that. It is like a scant like 1/4 inch, not even, probably somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4. So it's a little bit off. So that means I probably need to add something somewhere. And I have a feeling is I need to add a little bit more fullness into this area, because usually, but not always, there's a little bit more ease. Like usually this section gets eased into this curve. So I might just take a look at this and see if I need to fill out this bust a little bit. I'm going to actually do it the exact opposite way too. I know that I want to I'm going to walk it down and see if I get the exact same thing going this way. And I do. I just get a little bit, it's a little bit off. So I kind of have to decide myself where I'm going to add the fullness for this, because I could have accidentally marked this too short. Like this could be fine, and this could be too long. So the first thing that I usually do when I'm having issues with that is I go back to my starting pieces. I want to try to see, I will sort of line this up here and see if this is properly sort of filling out roughly what I thought my shape was. And it is. So that's good. And then I'll kind of take this next. And see if this is filling out roughly what I thought my shape was. And it is, actually. So I might have, when I was pinning it out, put too much ease on this side. More than on this side. So because this will stretch a little bit. This is going to stretch a little bit. And this area is going to kind of close in a little bit. So I think for sake of argument, I'm going to take a second and sort of see how this pins together. See, and I'm hitting right on those spots. I think I'm gonna, it's such a small amount. Oh, and see, this is one of those things, like, it annoys me that it's just like this teeny tiny amount that's like not lining up. Like, again, it's like maybe 1/4 of an inch. I feel like this is plenty. I'm gonna go take a look at this on my mannequin really quick and come back. Okay, after a little bit of manipulation on the mannequin, I've decided I'm going to add just a little bit in here. Just a smidge. I think I'd rather make sure that I have more armpit coverage. And honestly, to do that, it's such a small amount. Such a teeny tiny amount. Literally, I'm just going to take this. Like, do we see how tiny that amount is? So I'm literally just adding a teeny tiny amount. Because I think it's right otherwise. So, again here, we'd line it up, edges as close as we can, make our registration mark. Then you want to walk this down, get your bottom point lined up, make your registration mark, which I had already done, just there. Okay, so then you can go ahead and snip these guys. Okay, so now on this one, like I said, I decided I was going to make it the same. I decided that I was going to make it the same as the pattern. Because the whole point of this is I wanted to kind of be able to show and compare how these pieces ended up looking. So here's the original back pattern. It's a little different, but very similar, right? Just bigger. And this has a little more taken out in the side seam. Like I think they transferred the dart to the side seam here because of how angled this is. I didn't want to do that. I had my reasons. I just think it, I think for me, I want the extra space. I don't want it to fit too tight. Like I want it to be a little more roomy, basically, in case I gain or lose weight. And then here we go. We have the original version and the new version. So you can kind of see how those fit. And you can see they have some registration marks in here to help line up the side. It's actually really funny how similar the shaping is. I think I've got a little bit more shaping on my piece because I am curvier, but it's incredibly similar. And now I'm going to go ahead, so I'm going to make this little center stitching line, which I already put in 1/2 of, basically, but we're just going to and to do this, I just copied this half and then I folded the piece of paper and cut, okay? So now I can take my ruler so this is going to be a stitching line for the front placket and where that trim that I was talking about gets inserted. So there's that hook and or that loop trim that gets put in here. It'll actually run all the way up the collar, but this is like the specific area that you need to stitch before you clip this center. Okay. That I made the double-sided, and then we're going to take this, we're going to take it folded. Make sure it's all lined up nice, and you're going to pop your registration marks in it. Bam. Okay. So another thing that I personally like to do, this is not something you have to do, but it helps me a lot personally. It would be here. That, I think in theory, and I can go put it on my mannequin to compare, should be my bust line. I like to have measurements on my bust line and my waistline. Like I know my waistline, like I know this right here. That point is my waistline. So I like to know what all of this equals together. And I usually just sort of go ahead I think my bust will be 10.25. So, and then you can also do like your shoulder seam too if you want, like shoulder cross shoulders. Sometimes I like to know that. I like to know that more on my back. I like to make sure that I know that this distance, basically my arm's eye to arm's eye measurement across my back, is roughly what I need it to be at about 17. So I can take my bust, you can take my 3 bust measurements. Hold on, let me grab a little piece of scrap paper. $13, 10.25. Now there's also going to be a little bit of gappage in here. So this is a variable because this can be open and closed a bit. But my total is 5.4. So 44.75. My chest is, I think, a 45 right now. 46-ish. So this actually might be a little bit small. That mannequin is like a smidge. I've gone up a little bit of weight since I last redid that. And then the waist I have on this. So 40.25. So yeah, this is going to be, I probably could have actually made this a little bit bigger, giving myself a little more wiggle room. And I might do that with some side seam allowance give, just to make sure that it fits me the way I want. Because this is very close to my current measurements. Which I said, I think my waist is right around a 40. It's fluctuating at the moment. But my waist is right around a 40 and my bust is right around a 45, I think. So we're close. There's always going to be some give. Like I said, this whole point of this is it's a lace up thing, so you get a nice V in here. So there's some wiggle room into how close that gets tightened. So I have some give for my bust if my bust is a little bit bigger, or depending on what bra I'm wearing underneath it on a given day. I also can add, so the places at this point where it's going to be easiest for me to alter this a little bit would be at the side seam and at the center back. So, and you can usually add a little bit here and there on all of that and get a pretty good fit. So I'm very close. I'm happy with where I'm at. This is going to be a good, I think a good size for me. I sort of trying to make this YouTube channel just shows me sort of how much ADHD brain I have sometimes, because I literally forgot to remind you to put green lines on these things. So the green lines for these different pieces, I know that the center back is going to be on the straight of grain, so I know that the green line is going to be parallel to that. So we're going to put a green line here. Shunk shunk. All right. Same, the center front is easy because, again, I know the green line. You can decide to put it wherever you want on the pattern. It doesn't matter which side. But I know that this is going to be green line on the straight, so the center front is going to be on the straight of grain. So you can draw your green line over here. All right. And then this piece, you can even use, you know, like there's different ways to do it. Some people like to do it off the back, some people like to do it off the front. But this is also going to be on the straight of grain, and so I try to use this is the other reason why I tend to draw the bust line at least lightly in, so that I know roughly where these should meet. So this was my old, this was your if this was your paper pattern, your sloper, you could see here's where a dart would be, here's where a dart would be, right? So I want to make sure that this is also on a similar grain to this. There we go, it's a little off. So those are my green lines. So you don't want to forget to do that on your pattern. Also, you should label your pattern. As long as I'm here, I might as well remind you to label it. So I'm going to label this as front, cut 1, no seam allowance added. Oh, actually, no, this is not cut 1. It is cut 1. It's cut 1 of fashion fabric, which I usually write FF for fashion fabric, and then cut 1 facing. Or you can write fashion fabric, you can just write fabric, because I also use underlining, interlining, interfacing, like sometimes I'll use little abbreviations. So you're going to cut 1 of the fabric and 1 of facing, and there's no seam allowance added to the pattern, so I'm going to write that, no seam allowance added, and I'm going to put 3D21, just so that I know when this was made. And then you're going to do the same. So this is side front, cut 2. This does not have any facing. So this one has a facing, this has no extra layers to it. And again, no seam allowance added. And then our back. So we're going to write back, cut to, no seam allowance added. Right, and then, like I said, I like to label how much I'm adding for my seam allowance, or put the seam allowance on the pattern to start with. Okay, I still need to do my waist and arm's eye stuff. Again, that's coming in the next video. Okay, so here is the sleeve pattern. We've got two pieces. I've got this is the top part of the sleeve, and then this is the bottom part of the sleeve. Now, interesting thing is, you might, I don't know, I guess it depends on how much you pay attention to my videos, but does the shape of this look familiar? And don't just look right there with the piece sitting next to it, which gives it away. The shape of this is incredibly similar. Incredibly similar. To the pattern piece that I adjusted a few videos ago when I made my blouse. I made that yellow blouse that also sort of had a 70s Gunne Sax feel. Like, incredibly similar, I feel like. Like, look at the angles. Look at the angles there, like, parallel. So, I'm gonna cheat. I'm absolutely gonna cheat here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to trace out this and take away the seam allowance. I've decided, because I want to have this full pattern available to me, all of the pieces. I'm going to not just cut this, I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to make it shorter, roughly about the same length as this. I was kind of looking at some things on my arm earlier, and I think the drape I want to be about 20 to 20, like, because this poofs. Let me get the picture again. We want a little poof, and we want a little poof up here, right? So a little poof here, a little poof here. I think I want this to be about 21 inches from the center top to the poofiest point, which would be this outer point. So I'm going to kind of do some measurements on this in comparison, because I kind of looked at, I stuck a hair tie. Let me show you. I stuck a hair tie on my arm like this, where I thought the top of this part would be, and then I stuck my tape measure into that, and then went and looked in the mirror and sort of tried to figure out where it was at my arm. Ooh, let's do that really quick. No, let's not. Like, so that I could kind of visualize how much I needed. So yeah, we're completely gonna cheat and just use this, which is much easier. You know, I could draft this from scratch, but I also, you know, want to show you that it's okay to take a pattern piece from a pattern that already exists and use it with another project. Like, you got a pattern piece that works, that you know does what you want it to, use it. Figure out how to make it work. I don't think that there's going to be any issue with the, I mean, especially because there's a lot of gathering in this. There's not going to be any issue trying to fit it into the arms eye here. It should fit in just fine. And yeah, we're going to go with this. I taped a couple pieces of paper together, and I have made a copy of this sleeve. So in this, you can see I made sure to add all of the registration marks. So this is where the gathering is, this is the top, this is the front, registration marks for the back, where the arm meets the top. Then I took this and kind of lined it up and sort of tried to make a similar swoop down here. So I measured the length of this. It was 12.5, and I decided I wanted to go a little bit longer because I was measuring kind of my underarm to where I thought this was going to end up sitting on my forearm and stuff like that. So I would rather, as always, I would rather this sleeve turn out a little bit big and me have to go back in and take some, like I will only just have to take fullness out of the bottom here. I'll just have to shorten it for the most part. Maybe an inch or so if it's too long. I would rather it be an inch too long down here than too short. The main thing that you want to take into account when you're deciding how long this is like arm movement. So it needs to be, this is where if you have a center back to wrist or shoulder to bent elbow to wrist measurement, you can really like start to figure these things out. And you kind of want to make sure, so this area right here where the dip is the longest, this is basically like sort of, if you think about the back of the shoulder across the elbow, and then that's going to go into, so that's kind of that elbow point there is this bend area here. So again, if it's a little long, I'm not going to be sad. So I ended up going with, after I played with a few things, so I think for right now I'm cutting this at a little bit longer than 21.5. It's like 21 and 21 and a, we're gonna say 3/4. I need to smooth that out a smidge. And then back here we've got like, so then this actually comes down just a little bit lower than that center point. But this isn't, this is, well, this is the center of the arm up here. Your elbow point would be back here. So that's why we need the extra room there. And then on the inside, this is only about 13.5, I believe. Okay, before I go forward with the lower part of the arm, actually there was a couple more things I wanted to talk about. We're gonna get our pieces. I don't need the front. I need the side front and the back piece. So as I said, when I traced the bigger sleeve, I did go ahead and I put the registration marks from the pattern. Now the next thing I just need to do is I need to, here, this one, so let me show you here. There's the front registration mark, there's a back registration mark, then there's these two here, which are the gathers. So I'm going to do a little arrow and a squiggly line, because this is how I like to do it, so that I remember that those are gathers. And this is right here, we're going to end up notching as well, because I need to know. So this point is going to line up with the seam, the shoulder seam. These are not going to line up with anything. Those are gather points. But I'm still going to go ahead and take a notch or two it. So, gather, top, gather. Okay. Now I'm not going to notch these guys yet, because before I can do that, I need to check them against my pattern and then make variations. Basically, I just need to make sure that they line up in some way, shape, or form. So this piece, again, has no seam allowance. I'm doing this all without seam allowance because it makes it much easier, except I put seam allowance here. I don't know why I left that. Okay, just ignore this. Let me get that off really quick. Oh, because I was changing this slightly, that's why. Okay, so you can see I haven't notched on this pattern yet either. So it's a little bit harder because they're facing each other. But I don't know if you can see through the pattern, those are slightly off. These ones are over here, this one is over here. So if you want this, I'm going to move So you want this point to line up, and I'm just going to go ahead, because the one already lines up, I'm just going to go ahead and mark my other notch there. So, and then I'm going to erase this one. And that's partially because I'm taking these from two different, I took this from a completely different pattern. So, go ahead and notch. This is kind of the easier way to do it. Lay it down. Make sure we got our notches where they need to be. And then you go notch. Okay? And then you make sure they line back up how you want them. Okay, and this again is called truing the pattern. Okay, so I got the same thing on the front, which I need to take my side front piece, because that's where my notch is for this. And you know what, I think I'm just going to go ahead and notch it right where it is on the side front, because it's probably slightly easier. And hey, look, it actually lines up already perfectly, which is interesting. But this one lined up, the other one didn't. So, although I do think I was kind of roughly guessing when I was kind of roughly guessing at the notches on here. Like, it's kind of always in about the same arbitrary space, kind of like right here. Sometimes you'll get them a little bit higher, but there's always a notch within this area, so. And you can, like I could put, if I wanted to, I could attempt to decide a corresponding notch on the front for where the gathers would need to start, or like it should be straight to here and then gathered beyond that, but I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna like ease and eyeball it myself. There is one other registration mark on the original for this pattern, and that is a mark down here, which I did put in. It corresponds to, so it is this mark here that corresponds to this. I put a rough one in for now, and I probably will, once I end up cutting both pieces, that is when I will actually like solidify where I want this mark and this mark. I could sit here and try and math out like, oh, this plus this divided by this is this much, and so now that it's this long, I need to divide, like, it's just kind of a rough lineup so that you know you need to gather in this area. So, but I mean, this whole thing is gathered, and you're just going to make it fit. You just want to make sure that, like, you don't want these gathering, you don't want this gathered too much this way. Again, it has to do with the wrap of the arm. You want to make sure that it's gathered towards the bend of the elbow in this particular case. So that's where that would put this, I believe. Because of the, yeah, so that would put, like, if this was on my arm, the zipper is towards the inside of my arm here. That notch is going to be back by my elbow. And that's exactly why this is coming for the elbow here. So that, like, that would be my understanding of the placement of this notch, just so that you make sure that this gets near the elbow, because this is the length necessary to go over the bend of the elbow. Okay, so again, I kind of just put an arbitrary mark about where I thought was the same place. It might be a little bit more this way, it might be a little bit more this way. Again, I kind of was eyeballing it. Actually, I think I'm going to put it here. Again, I was kind of all eyeballing it. So I might have a better understanding once I make this in my size. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, so now we're going to work on this piece. Basically, we're going to use a super scientific method to sort of figure some things out here. I put a rubber band on my arm. Well, not a rubber band, it's a hair tie. So I think this is about where it's going to sit. I wanted it to come down, I want the gathering to come down past my elbow. Actually, this is kind of scrunched down a little bit. Okay. So I want it to be low enough that it's not going to get in my elbow crease or interfere with, like, the bend of my elbow, right? So I'm going to start by... I've already taken some of these measurements, but I'm going to start by taking that measurement basically down to about my wrist. Oops. I don't know where all of my good tape measures have gone. Like, they're in the apartment somewhere. They're just... So that's like 7.5, 8. I'm going to round it up to 8 for right now. I can always shorten things. Well, yeah, we'll write 7.5. Alright. Then I'm going to take a measurement right here at the hair tie. I'm not going to pull tight though. Whoops, don't twist. Like, I'm going to let it be kind of nice and loose. Not like super loose. Like, so we're looking at about 11, but I am going to bend my arm up because when this muscle contracts, it actually like expands a little bit. So now it's a little bit over 11. Like if you flex the muscle. You can't see that. There's the 11, there's the 12. So it's like 11 1/4. I'm gonna round it up to 11 1/2 just to give it some space. I'm probably gonna put more wiggle room into here anyways. I'm gonna measure my wrist, which is like 6 inches. I have tiny wrists. Like 6 1/4. Again, I'm gonna probably add some ease into all of this too, and then I'm just gonna measure my, like, kind of the middle of my arm at 8. Okay, so now I'm gonna use those to draft a pattern. I decided I was just going to do this on regular paper because it's there. All right. So again, you're going to need straight ruler and a curved ruler. I don't ever, I know that this has the straight ruler on it. I, for some reason, just never, ever, ever, ever use the straight ruler on this curved ruler. I always prefer to take one of my other ones. I think, I don't know, it's probably just habits. I'm gonna go ahead and use that as our center. So I'm going to draft this out. Actually, yeah, we're gonna use this one. So how long did I say? 7.5. Seven and a half. We'll add seam allowance in here too. So that's our top, that's our bottom. So 11.5. I'm gonna round that up to 12 for sake of ease and for the sake of ease. This line is eventually going to become curved. So I'm gonna draw that line, but I'm also gonna put marks. Now here at the bottom, my wrist was, oh my goodness, excuse me, my wrist was 6.25, so we're going to round that up to 6.5, which would be 3.25, we can round it up to 7, let's round it up to 7 for now, for ease of math. Yeah. Dee-dee-dee. Again, this can always be adjusted more afterwards. And then we were looking at about halfway. My my halfway measurement was somewhere around 8. And that was a tight 8. So I'm going to go up to, I mean, it wasn't tight, but it was like, I'm going to go up 4.5. 4.5 is 9. See, and that's a pretty steep, like that's, whoop, my arms are not that, it's way steeper than this. It's actually funny because the wrist of this actually fits me. Would actually fit me with like a 5/8 seam allowance. The upper part wouldn't, but then this is where you start to kind of play with your measurements. I think, so what did I made this 7? I'm going to make this 8. I don't want it too big. I don't mind if it's going to be a little bit bigger on me. Make that 12 all the way up there. That is quite a bit extra. Let's go ahead and take that too. 11.5 total. This middle one is kind of just a guide, just to make sure. Because some people have weird shaped forearms. I don't know. Some people might have more thickness here, might have thicker wrists. Again, I'm making this specifically to my measurements. I mean, this is how you get a gauntlet, basically. There's a little bit more to it, but the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add curves in. I usually just sort of use the middle hip curve-ish area of the curved ruler. I don't want to come up too much. And we're going to do the same thing down at the bottom. Find a nice curve or two, however it works best for your brain to adjust. Okay. Should put some tape up there. Yeah. All right. So we've adjusted with the curves, the curve of the body, etc. So now let's just double check. So we've got, this is still 7.5. Which are, well, that ended up slightly longer than 7.5. Huh, interesting. So we've got our basic gauntlet. It is similar to this. This is getting a zipper in it, and you don't want it to be like too super tight. Like that's why I was saying, you know, sort of adjust your ease. Plus these curves will actually have also added a little bit of wiggle room to that, particularly up here. This is also how, like, if you want to make gauntlets or bracers or whatever you want to call them, band braces for like a cosplay costume, this is the exact method that I use for making patterns for those, for like foam bracers. So that's a pretty good fit. Like, it's got just a little bit of wiggle room. Seams are touching at the top. It doesn't feel too tight. I touch them at the bottom. It's got a little, I don't know. It's hard when you're a plus size woman with skinny wrists and ankles. So I might make some adjustments here later. We'll see. I might just kick that in a smidge more, because that does, to me personally, feel a little bigger on the wrist, but that I can also do after the fact. This is literally just the start. So again, we're going to do the same thing that we've done with other I'm going to do the same thing that we've done with all of the other ones, and we're going to true up the pattern. You want your angles to be about the same off that center line that you made. I shouldn't have put it right where the tape was, I guess. It's my fault. So at this point, if either of your angles is off, you could trim it. If your curves, like this top meets, this bottom is a little off, so I might just, I mean, that's a negligible amount, but like if something didn't meet up quite, you could trim it. We're going to put a registration mark. Notch it a little bit down from the top. In this case, because you've got everything lining up, you can keep it folded and you can just punch both of them at once. You know it's good to go. You know that's where you want it to roughly line up. I think that's also roughly where we're going to end up stopping the zipper. Circle. See, they have a zipper going in that's like just slightly longer than 6 inches. That's where on this pattern. Yeah, that's probably good. For that, I'm going to use the notch as a double meaning. Like, it's fine. It's not going to confuse me. So when I make this part, I actually will only stitch from here to here. And then this part will be where the zipper gets put in down there. So that's the basics of that. Like I said, this would close towards the center, towards the inner arm. It should end up sitting about like that. Yeah. Again, no seam allowance, so I'll be adding seam allowance here, and I'll be adding seam allowance down at the bottom for the hem. And we should also be good pattern makers. Put our grain line and put our what did they call this? They called it a sleeve cuff. So we'll call it our sleeve cuff for our Gunne Sax dress. And we're going to I'm going to cut to a fashion, and then I'm going to cut to well, we're going to cut to of lace and fabric. Because this one is the one I'm going to do, I am going to do it this way, I've decided. So lace, the floral pattern and then the lace over either the floral pattern. I haven't decided if underneath the lace is going to be floral pattern or a gold satin lining or cotton lining. I don't know. I'm still debating about that. I got several thoughts in my brain. So we got no seam allowance added. I'm going to add an inch here. I'm going to add and then up here, I'm just going to add a 1/2 inch as well. So I'm going to work with 1/2 inch seam allowances in this particular case for the most part. Unless I just want a little bit extra down here in case suddenly it becomes short and I want to lengthen the sleeve a little bit. So now we have top and bottom of sleeve. I need to copy. I'm not going to show you copying this, but I need to copy out this belt tie. I was, however, looking at the belt tie. The belt tie goes in, I'll show you. The belt tie goes in at the princess seam, I believe. So I have decided that I'm going to add an extra 10 inches to this belt as is to give me a nice long belt and so that I can make nice big bows. And that was after I kind of stuck it on, I held it up to my mannequin, kind of saw how far back around the body it went. I was like, okay, I've got, you know, this much left. How much, if I add 10 inches, that gives me 2 sort of like nice floppy bow loops, and then this remaining bit as the tail. So yeah, so like, and a lot of times when I'm upsizing ties, that's like kind of the amount. It's usually somewhere between 10 to 12 inches that I end up wanting to add so that I can get a nice, pretty bow. So I'm going to copy that out really quick so that I have a copy of it in paper. And then I'm going to move on to the skirts. Ooh, we're getting so close to being able to like cut this all and make it. I'm excited. Okay, so just to be fully clear on what I have done at this point, we have our center front, our side front, all of the registration marks necessary, our back, we have our upper sleeve, our lower sleeve cuff, and our belt. So this is everything that we need for the bodice. The belt I did make particularly long. This is like 52 inches. But I really like long dramatic bows on things. So I want some extra space. If I decided it's too much, I can always cut it shorter later. So that is the entirety of the top. All of the pieces that we need. So now I just need to adjust the skirt. I was originally not going to make a pattern piece. I was originally not going to make a pattern piece for the ruffle, but I think now, because I kind of want to have everything complete and together for this pattern piece, I will end up making a pattern for the ruffle. So I need to adjust the skirt front and back to fit properly. I also have not done the back neck facing. So on the bodice, the front bodice piece is self-faced. It has you cut a facing that is the exact same piece. And then the back has a neck facing. I'm going to wait to pattern the neck facing until I actually have constructed and fit this, just in case there's any slight changes in that dart or the fit of the bodice. So that is where we are at currently. So we have all of these top pieces up to there. And then our belt. Yeah, very excited. So thank you so much for tuning in. I know that this is a very long process, especially between the 2 videos. But it was a lot of information to cover, and I tried to keep it as concise but valuable as possible. And I think 2 1-hour videos is much better than 1 2-hour video. So I hope you really enjoyed watching me work on this. I hope you are going to stick around and see the remainder of my project. So next up will be probably a short video about altering the skirt pattern, because that one's going to be pretty simple, and then we'll go into the actual construction of it. I am so thankful for all of you that tune in each week and watch my videos. I absolutely love you. Please remember to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, hit that bell if you want notifications. Leave me a comment or two. I do really enjoy talking to people. I am very responsive, especially if you ask questions or have similar interests to me. Thank you again for tuning in. I love you all. I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye.